What would you do if the people closest to you had no idea who you really were, until a single sentence shattered their illusion? My name is Dr. Eleanor Hayes, but in my family, I've only ever been Ellie, the quiet one, the odd one, the one you asked to decode your insurance policy but never invited to speak at the table. So when my sister Victoria invited me to her post-campaign brunch, a silk and silver affair in her Georgetown home, filled with donors, political staffers, and the kind of people who pretend to forget your name, I already knew the script. I wasn't expecting kindness or curiosity. Honestly, I wasn't even expecting a seat. But I went anyway. It was a crisp Sunday morning, the kind where the air smells like espresso and expensive perfume. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated through marble halls like smoke. I sat quietly with a lukewarm cup of coffee in hand while Victoria spun stories about fundraisers and Senate breakfasts like she'd personally reformed Capitol Hill. Then mid-laugh, she waved vaguely in my direction. "Oh, and that's my sister Ellie," she said with a toothy grin. "She works somewhere in D.C. No one's quite sure what she does. Something with files, I think, bureaucrat stuff." They laughed. I smiled. Faintly. The kind of smile you wear like armor. I set my cup down, and then the air shifted. A man entered from the back patio navy suit, earpiece, sharp eyes. He didn't carry a mimosa. He carried presence. I knew that posture. Executive security. White House. He scanned the room, zeroed in on Victoria's husband, the senator, and made his approach. But before he spoke, he saw me. He froze. Blink. Then softly but clearly he said, "Sir, I wasn't aware Dr. Hayes would be here. She briefs the president every Tuesday. You could have heard a pin drop on that $1,000 rug." My sister's smile cracked. The senator stared. And the people who laughed at me 2 minutes ago, they just stopped. But I didn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't gloat. I didn't explain. I just reached for my tea, calm as ever. They had spent years crafting a version of me that was easy to overlook, and in 7 words, it all unraveled. But the real shift that was still to come. You'd think a moment like that would feel like revenge, but it didn't. It felt quiet. Like something inside me had finally stopped screaming. Because the truth is, I had spent my entire life being invisible to them. When I was little, I used to think invisibility was a superpower. While other kids begged for attention, I curled up in corners with books on Cold War diplomacy. I was decoding spy networks while my sister Victoria practiced ballet twirls in the front yard for the neighbors. She danced. I disappeared. Our parents loved the spotlight. Charmers networkers socially polished to a fault. They craved accomplishments that could be framed. Victoria gave them that. Dance medals, debate wins, prom queen. Her world fit their mold. Me, I brought home science fair ribbons and papers on encryption protocols. Once I tried to explain a satellite triangulation model to my dad. He stared at me and said, "What's the point of that?" "Are you planning to launch a rocket, Ellie?" I laughed. He didn't. That was the last time I tried to explain what I loved. By 15, I stopped trying to impress them. I earned scholarships in silence, tested into Yale through the Reserve Officer Training Corps, graduated with a dual focus in political science and intelligence operations. My military commission came the day after graduation. No one from my family showed up. That morning, Victoria posted a photo from a vineyard. The caption read, "Family comes first." I looked at that post while tightening my bun in front of the mirror at the swearing-in ceremony. That was the last time I cried over them. From there, I disappeared on purpose. I moved through posts, some domestic others weren't. You don't list where you go in my line of work. You just go. You complete the mission. You keep your mouth shut and your head down. Intel work is shadow work. Behind closed doors, I earned a name. I briefed commanders in war zones. I translated intercepted chatter in freezing bunkers. I advised diplomats mid-crisis, all before sunrise. I built a reputation where it mattered. And eventually, I was tapped for the National Security Council. Now every Tuesday, I deliver the Presidential Daily Brief, 20 minutes that help shape the course of national security decisions. I've spoken directly to 3 presidents, none of them Victoria ever mentioned at her parties. But I never told my family, not because I was hiding, but because they never asked. And still, the brunch wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the world finally catching up. I left that brunch the way I came in, alone. No goodbye hugs, no apologies, just a thin smile from Victoria and a parting air kiss that didn't quite land. But something had shifted, and I wasn't the only one who noticed. It started with a single tweet. Just hours later, a junior staffer from a think tank, someone barely out of grad school, posted, "Just watched a family laugh at their sister for working in files," then freeze when someone announced she briefs the president weekly. The silence was iconic. No names, no tags, just vibes. But Washington is small, and egos love to talk. Within 24 hours, brunch Twitter lit up like a match in a dry field. Speculation flooded in. Who was she? Who was the sister? Was it real by the second day people had pieced it together? Victoria's brunch was publicized just enough, and her husband's Senate ties made it easy to follow the breadcrumbs. And then someone found me. Public records, award citations, a leaked photo from an overseas humanitarian coordination in Afghanistan, another one from a NATO simulation in Germany, a grainy image of me crouched beside a tribal elder, gesturing over voting maps. They weren't selfies. They were snapshots, stolen moments behind serious work. The headline started quietly. "The woman behind the briefing. Ellie Hayes, National Security's hidden architect. She briefs the president every Tuesday." My inbox exploded. Former colleagues messaged me. "Did you mean to go viral? Is this real? About time someone saw what you do?" Victoria radio silence. No calls, no texts. But her Instagram got quiet. She removed old posts, the ones where she'd tagged me as her quirky little sister who works in D.C. doing God knows what. I wasn't offended. I was amused. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't some plotted reveal. It was reality unfolding in the only way truth ever does. Slowly, then, all at once. And just when things started to settle, a message came from someone I never expected. The First Lady. I was summoned for a classified roundtable on infrastructure vulnerabilities. Just a few staffers, nothing grand, but after the meeting, as people filed out, she touched my arm gently and said, "We see you. Not just what you do, but how you carry it." And for the first time in years, I let those words land, because until then, I didn't know how badly I needed someone to say it. Not "good job," not "we're proud," just "we see you." But not everyone saw me for the right reasons, because soon the calls started coming, and one voice I thought I'd buried came crawling back. The first time Victoria called, I didn't answer. I stared at the screen as her name lit up, then faded into voicemail. I already knew what it would say, and I was right. "Hey, Ellie, wow, I saw the posts. The articles. You really made waves, huh? Proud of you, sis. Let's catch up soon." I deleted it. Because that message, that wasn't for me. That was for her reputation. Victoria had always known how to read a room, especially when the room was watching. But what she never understood was that real recognition doesn't need to be staged. A week later, I stood at a small, untelevised lunch hosted by the Department of Defense. Quiet. Understated. The kind of event that doesn't trend but means everything to the people in the room. I was being honored with a civilian service commendation. No red carpet, just handshakes, nods and respect. An old colonel I once worked with during a tense winter in eastern Turkey approached me after the ceremony. Weathered face, stiff, uniform voice like gravel. "You were the only one who ever listened, not just to what was said, but what wasn't. That's why we trusted you." I nodded. Didn't say much. Didn't need to, because that was the moment I realized I had spent years being evaluated by people who had no clue what my silence was worth. Victoria didn't know what a strategic brief looked like or what it felt like to deliver intelligence that could steer the course of an international crisis. She just knew how to get applause. So when I was invited to speak at a leadership retreat for senior intelligence officers, I didn't talk about files or protocols. I talked about silence. I told them the world underestimates what it can't categorize. but sometimes it's the quiet ones, the overlooked ones who see the whole board. There were nods, real ones, the kind that come from people who've lived it. We all had our versions of being dismissed, underestimated, erased. Mine just came in pastel dresses and Instagram captions that never included me. And then came the gala, a national service gala black tie formal invite embossed in gold. Victoria would be there. Of course she would. That's her world. Cameras, chandeliers, performative patriotism. But this time, I wasn't there as her shadow. I was one of the honorees. And when I walked in simple black dress, low heels, nothing flashy, Victoria spotted me. Her eyes widened just for a second. Then she smiled that smile. "Ellie." "I didn't know you'd be here," she said, holding a folded program with my name printed in bold under the final section. "You mean," I said softly, "you didn't expect me to matter here?" She didn't reply. The lights dimmed. The host called for attention. I slipped away before she could gather her next performance. When they announced me, I stepped onto the stage and looked out at a room full of people who had no idea what it took to stand there. And I said, I've worked in tents embassies and windowless bunkers. I've briefed presidents in crisis. But some of the hardest rooms I've stood in were family dining rooms where being cautious, curious, or simply different meant you were invisible. The room went still. I was never loud, never demanded attention. But I've learned silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, and when used well, it becomes strength. The applause didn't start loud, but it grew, and it meant something. Because for once, I didn't have to explain who I was. But not everyone clapped. Some wounds don't heal just because the world sees you. Some stay quiet, like an echo. And that echo was waiting for me near the exit. She was waiting near the doors. Victoria. Still flawless in a crimson gown, her husband by her side, though he hung back, maybe sensing what was coming. She stepped forward alone. This time, no cameras, no pose. Just her and me. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I deserved that she whispered. I've made you feel small for years, because if I couldn't explain what you did, I decided it didn't matter. And that was cruel. I didn't say anything. Not right away. She looked down, voice softer. You don't have to forgive me, but I wanted you to know. I'm trying to see now. I studied her for a moment. Same polished look, same perfect posture. But the edges were cracked, not rehearsed this time. I nodded slowly. Calm. You can try, I said, but I won't shrink to fit your world ever again. She looked away. And I walked past her, not to prove a point, but because I could. For so long I'd waited for validation that never came. Softened my questions, bit my tongue, smiled through the static. But somewhere between the bunks in Afghanistan and the strategy rooms in D.C., I stopped waiting. Some people let go to escape. I let go to breathe. The holidays faded. No more cards. No more showing up just to feel invisible. And for once, it wasn't lonely. It was liberating. After the gala, I returned home, sat on my couch with a mug of mint tea, and pulled down a leather folder I kept tucked between declassified briefings and old deployment notes. Inside a lifetime, commendations, mission summaries, transcripts of speeches I'd never told anyone I gave. And in the very back, a single sticky note I'd written years ago during a lonely assignment in Estonia. It read, "If they don't ask, don't explain." Let your silence become gravity. I was 27 when I wrote that. Cold frostbitten toes translating intercepted chatter for 12-hour shifts in a makeshift intel cell. No one ever asked what I saw. When I came home that spring for Easter, Victoria looked at me and said, "Wow, you've really let your hair go. Don't they have salons over there?" I laughed in the car ride back, not because it was funny, but because I still hoped she'd ask, "What did you see?" She never did. That was the real turning point. Not one moment, but the slow unwinding of the rope I'd always used to tie myself back to them. And when that rope loosened, I found something unexpected: peace. But the world didn't stay small forever, because the ripple effect from that brunch wasn't done. In fact, it was just about to reach the highest room in the land. The invitation came in a navy envelope, thick and crisp, with gold embossed lettering. National Service Gala Capitol Ballroom, to honor Americans who have quietly shaped the country. I almost declined. Recognition had never been my goal. I wasn't used to spotlights. I'd spent my life in shadows. But something inside me, the same part that had walked into Victoria's brunch weeks before, whispered, "Go, not to be seen, to stand in your truth." So I went. Simple black dress, low heels, no entourage, just me and the silver lapel pin I earned when I became a senior strategic advisor. I didn't walk in to impress. I walked in to exist as myself. And there she was, Victoria, near the press wall, red gown, perfect hair, Senator Worthington on her arm. She spotted me immediately. Her face froze, but only for a second. Then she approached. "Ellie," she said, softer than usual. "I didn't know you'd be here." I glanced at the folded program in her hand, my name bolded in the final section. "You mean," I replied, "you didn't expect me to matter here?" She looked down. I read about the award, she murmured, and the other stuff. "I never knew what you really did. I just thought it didn't count." I didn't need to finish her sentence. We both knew she had. The host called for attention. Lights dimmed. I turned and walked away. When they announced my name, I stepped onto the stage. There was polite applause at first. Then the MC said the words, "The mind behind mission decisions," the woman who briefs the president every Tuesday, and suddenly the room leaned in. I looked out at rows of polished faces, men and women who'd probably passed me in airports or parties without ever seeing me. And I began. I've worked in tense embassies and secure bunkers. I've briefed leaders at the edge of war, but some of the hardest rooms I've ever stood in were family dining rooms, where being cautious, curious, or simply different meant you were invisible. Silence. Then I continued. I was never loud, never campaigned for attention. But I've learned something. Silence isn't weakness, it's strategy, and when you use it right, it becomes strength. This time, the applause was real, solid, lasting. As I stepped down near the back exit, Victoria waited, but she didn't smile. "I deserve that," she said. "I've made you feel small for years. Because I didn't understand you. I decided you didn't matter, and that was cruel." I stood still, listening. "You don't have to forgive me, but I'm trying. I want to see you, really see you." I looked at her. The polished surface was still there, but something underneath had cracked. "You can try," I said, "but I won't shrink to fit your world ever again." She nodded, eyes glassy. I turned coat over my arm and walked away. Not to make a point, just because I could. For years, I'd begged the wrong audience to clap, tried to be palatable, relatable. I dimmed myself so I wouldn't outshine their comfort. And all it took to shatter that illusion were 7 words. She briefs the president every Tuesday. They didn't change me. They changed the volume of the room. Now I start my Tuesdays before sunrise. Quiet city, secure west entrance, briefing folder in hand, badge clipped. The guards know my name. The national security advisor nods when I walk in. The president listens. It's short, high stakes, always direct. But I don't flinch. I was forged under pressure. Sometimes, in the stillness afterward, I think of the girl I used to be, curled up in libraries, watching my sister twirl in praise. That girl used to believe if she just achieved enough, they'd say, "We're proud of you." They never did. So I learned to say it to myself, Victoria and I. We're civil now. Holiday pictures of her kids. I reply with updates on civic programs and youth outreach abroad. It's surface, but honest. Last Christmas, she sent me a message. One of the boys asked what it means to serve your country. I told him about you. I stared at that sentence for a long time. I didn't reply right away, but I mailed her son a copy of the Constitution Decoded edition with a single sticky tab on page 43. Courage doesn't always look loud. We live in different worlds now. Hers is curated, rehearsed. Mine is quiet, strategic, and I prefer mine. In my desk drawer, tucked beneath an old redacted briefing from a cyber crisis, I keep a folded note. The edges are worn from time and movement. 7 words. She briefs the president every Tuesday. I never asked for them to be said, but when they were, the world finally looked up. Not because I changed, but because they could no longer look away.